Yeah, and that's the hard part, I think, about the education is that people don't have that connection like they do with terrestrial environments. So it's harder for them to understand what we're doing, why we're protecting these areas, why they're important, because they essentially see the surface and they're like, wow, it's beautiful. Look at how spectacular it is, but don't really understand what's going on beneath the surface and going on some of the challenges that we have, like marine debris and things like that, because the surface of the ocean can look beautiful and pristine, and yet beneath that you could have quite a bit of marine debris and pollutants and other things going on. So it's hard for get people to care about these environments. It's a challenge we have as educators.
We have some friends in the Philippines that were running into that problem with their conservation work, and they got a grant to do VR work and create this
Wow.
video that, especially with kids or even adults that can't swim, they'd put on this VR headset and they'd get to go in their local waters through
Oh,
that.
neat.
And it was a good way to just introduce people to their local spots without having to teach them to swim right off the bat. Obviously, that was like the next step they wanted to do, but it was just a good way to get a lot of people to see what was under the water
That's really cool.
in a
Wow,
really immersive way.
Yeah.
that sounds very exciting. I need that technology for my students.
You know, I'll tell you a little bit of a story about the ocean being considered, or the deep ocean being considered sort of a dumping ground for many years ago. But a lot of people don't realize this, but there's quite a lot of disposed ordnance off of Hawaii dating back to World War II. And I was very involved in studies of disposed ordnance off of the island of Oahu, of course, where the big Pearl Harbor base is located.
Ordnance meaning
Ordnance,
bombs
yeah,
and
bombs and everything.
munitions for those that don't know the
Yeah,
term.
exactly. And back then, of course, you know, you've got some of this very old ordnance and you're trying to figure out what to do with it. It's quite dangerous, you know, and so how do you deal with it? I mean, in World War II, we had thousands and thousands of tons of ordnance that needed to be disposed of at the end of the war.
Yeah.
And so one way they kind of did that is sort of to dump it in deep ocean. And
Out of sight, out of mind.
yeah, so one of the types of ordnance that we were particularly concerned about was World War I era 100-pound mustard gas bombs.
Oh my gosh.
And they had actually brought them over to Hawaii in preparation for the attack on Japan as an alternative to use that. And then, of course, unfortunately, with the nuclear bombs, then they didn't need these. But they had something like 16,000 of these mustard gas bombs
Oh wow.
that they had to get rid of, and they were leaking. They were all in cases, and it was scary. And so the only thing they could think of doing was putting them on barges and then taking them out outside of Honolulu and disposing of them in deep water.
Yeah.
So we had to learn a lot about ordnance in order to do this. We actually got trained in different types of ordnance identification. So a chemical bomb, and we're really going way off topic here, but just an interesting
It's
story.
in the ocean.
Yeah,
Where it's fair game.
chemical bombs are designed very differently than explosive bombs. You know, explosive bombs are designed to actually break up and fragment large pieces of metal that do all the damage. Okay, whereas chemical bombs instead are supposed to crack open. You don't want them to be all burned up when they explode, so they don't really have a whole lot of explosive in them. They have sort of a little center rod of explosive, and all that does is crack the canister
Right.
that the chemical is in, and then it allows the chemical then to disperse at that point without, you know, burning it up, and that's how they work. And anyway, first thing we had to do was find where these bombs were disposed of, and we did, you know, and we located them. And then we were able to get down with the submersible and take a look at their condition. Well, because they're very thin walled, because they're supposed to break open, they pressure crushed on the way down, kind of like,
Oh no.
yeah, kind of like a toilet roll tube, you know, where you apply pressure, and they all kind of were squished in the center because of the pressure. And so a fair amount of the mustard gas was released at the time on their way to the bottom. And I was just sort of imagining as they were disposing of these, they were just, releasing all this mustard gas on the way down.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
So we got down to the bottom, and still there were bombs. All of them were pressure crushed, of course, but all the bombs still had a lot of mustard gas in it. But the temperature, the freezing temperature of mustard gas was basically above the temperature of the water at the depth that they were at.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
And so the mustard gas was frozen, and it kind of looked like sort of black charcoal
Oh, wow.
down there. And so we're very careful about, avoiding that. And in order to actually study these, we were looking at animals, and some animals were brought up that were living on the bombs, and we were trying to determine what type of an impact this was having on the environment. In order to do this study, we had special chemical weapons military groups out with us with special equipment and hoods and everything else and suits, and special measures were taken to actually clean off the submersibles that were in the vicinity of these bombs. And so we brought up some sea stars and some other things that we collected that came from the bomb. And in one particular case, it was actually a Brazingid, one of these big red arm things that we've seen on this dive. It had apparently latched on, and these bombs are so corroded and old that it had brought up a piece of the bomb itself with mustard gas
Oh, wow.
in there. And as soon as they brought it up, where the temperature was high enough, the mustard gas then liquefied. And then when they brought it into the ship, into a hood, it
Oh, no.
regained its gaseous state.
Oh,
What?
And there was sort of an alarm going on, and the entire deck that I was working on was evacuated. It was contained in a hood, but it was evacuated except for my lab, right up to the lab that I was working on, as well, because it was still potent. It was frozen, but it was still potent.
Yeah.
And they for 24 hours, the military specialists were making sure that none of this, they dealt with it, the problem,
yeah.
making sure none of this got escaped out into the ship itself.
Scary.
Wow.
But then what do you do about these things? And part of the reason we were doing the study is that they were looking at installing a cable route, an electric cable route between the islands, and that cable route was slotted to go right through the mustard gas field,
Wow.
right? But we were looking at this whole thing, and there's no way you can bring these bombs up separately. And a lot of them were so corroded as well that there's hardly any remnants left of them. And so I had to write up a paper and a report on the whole thing. And my recommendation is let nature take its course. Just leave them down here, and these things are going to be gone in 20 or 30 years from now
Yeah.
as well. But if you try to bring them up, then you're creating a bigger hazard, or you try to clean them up or dredge them. And they did not put one of these electric lines through there. They're looking at alternate routes.
Wow.
But it's just kind of the things, over the years that we've done, just because we didn't know, the deep sea has always been something that we didn't know what we were doing to it, like almost like deep sea fisheries, that we don't know what harm that we've done. It was just the convenient place to try to get rid of problem things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's all over the seafloor. I know when I was growing up in New York City area that they used to take all the garbage and in these giant barges and take it straight offshore and drop it into the Hudson Canyon. And they did that for many, many, many years until back in like in the early 80s, there was this incident where all this medical waste was washing up on these beaches in New Jersey and New York, and syringes and things like that. And so people really freaked out about it, and beaches were closed. A lot of, they lost millions in revenue from the tourist season, certainly. And so they changed their whole practice at how to dispose of those kinds of materials instead of just dumping them into the Hudson Canyon, and started to landfill and had different procedures for dealing with that. But I think also just recently our sister ship, the Falcor, the Schmidt Ocean Institute vessel, they were documenting the DDT
It is
disposal
Alex
field
Adair.
outside of Los Angeles, and there's a huge area out there where we disposed of many 55-gallon drums of DDT that's just sitting on the bottom there. So it's yeah.
He was this was his like master's
you know,
project when I was.
what was
I don't
that?
know why I'm so.
Oh,
quiet.
Aaron.
Oh.
Oh, are you speaking, Aaron?
Yeah, we can barely hear you.
Aaron
What was
from
that,
video?
Aaron? What was it
Yep.
again,
Nope.
Aaron?
It's fine. We're good. I was talking to the ROV pilot. I didn't mean to be on SPL.
Oh, no problem. I thought you were going to add our blue water discussion.
Yeah, I'm sure you have seen so much of it through your types of work, Aaron, from video.
Well, one of the things is we've learned a lot over the years, and we're slowly becoming better custodians of the planet, I think.
Yeah.
You know, and we're talking about events that took place quite a few years ago, and you know, they didn't know any better. They didn't know how to deal with these problems, and this is one way to deal with them.
Mm-hmm.
And there was less interest in the deep sea and what was going on.
Yeah.
And now, via these type of programs like here, the Nautilus and the Ocean Exploration Trust and so forth, we're starting to care a lot more about it, and we're realizing this just isn't a dumping ground, and this isn't a place to dispose of things. There's beautiful, wonderful creatures down here that deserve to be protected.
Yeah, and it comes back to us. It eventually comes back to us. You know, it just sometimes it takes longer or harder to trace, and has impact upon the food webs and ecological webs of these areas. And sometimes we wind up. I mean, the whole thing with tuna is a good example of that, and the mercury levels in tuna. You know, these being apex predators, they accumulate in their flesh a lot of the contaminants in the ocean, and one of those is mercury from coal-fired power plants, mostly in Asia at this point, and the mercury gets into the atmosphere, drifts over the ocean, deposits on the ocean, smaller fish consume and aggregate that, and ultimately it bioaccumulates up into the tuna, which are the top predators. And so that's one of the reasons why they have recommendations, particularly for children and pregnant women, to not eat too much tuna because of that mercury accumulation. So, you know, no matter where we put our waste, it comes back to us in some form or another. And as you said, fortunately, we are learning more about these processes and becoming better stewards over time. But it's a challenge. It's a big challenge, certainly, what to do with all these materials.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why mercury really bioaccumulates is because it sticks to the fat tissue of the cells. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it really starts from the diatoms, the plankton.
Yeah.
That's where it starts accumulating, and it's just a scary thing to see that concentration of metals like mercury accumulating. And I was also with such an opportunity to be here, having EV Nautilus live and sharing all that information. We don't have to wait for that information to be printed in books, in textbooks, especially those that take up to 10 years.
Yep.
So we get very recent information to share that with our students.
Yeah, and the whole idea is you can't care about something that you don't know about. You can't care about something that you don't see.
You cannot protect what you cannot understand.
Right, and the beauty of these programs and sharing the all of the video and the explorations and everything via telepresence here is that we're sharing both knowledge and also just what we're seeing and what we're finding down there instantaneously with the world.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And hopefully this is developing interest and developing the concern for this environment, it's not that remote. We are going to be getting closer and closer and becoming more and more familiar with the deep sea as time progresses. And we've got to care about it. We just...
Yeah.
One of the very unique experiences that I'm having here while I'm on aboard EV Nautilus for just 3 weeks is that how connected the Hawaiian culture is making me, I'm earning more mindfulness of the work that I do. I really like how we, at the end of our watch or at the beginning of exploration with ROVs, the bottom of the ocean, would take a moment, would do our private ceremony to get our mindset, connect to the environment, ask for permission for us to take those samples and ask for guidance. That is very special.
Yeah.
It sets our intention, and I'm very, very excited about that, very humble about that experience, and I can't wait to share that with my students and just everyone I come across. So I love that idea of connecting with the environment.
Well, I don't mean to put Kainalo on the spot here, but I am going to. Maybe you could explain the Hawaiian concept of apuaha, because that's a very, very important concept that is still in practice today here, and it's really makes a lot of sense. Maybe you can explain it a bit.
Yeah, sorry, just to be sure, did you say ahupua?
I probably said it wrong,
Yeah.
but it relates to
You
more
said
terrestrial, the connection between the mountains.
Oh,
and the
yes,
sea.
yes, yeah. Yeah, like, I guess what Chris brought up, that concept of ahupua, the system is really just that connection between our uplands or our mountains all the way down to the ocean, and the understanding that the Hawaiian people have that they're all related, I guess, and they all play a role or have a function to each other, and they understood those relationships, and that we had to care for what happens above us will eventually come down to the ocean. And so yeah, just maintaining those relationships, I guess, and that was the system, and it was reciprocal. It was yeah, it was
You could
a
almost
familial.
geographically picture it. It was sort of like a
Yeah,
wedge from the mountains that's coming down to the seashore, right, and into the ocean. If I remember, I've seen some pictorials of
yeah,
how it worked.
exactly. Yeah, so it was just pretty much a land-based system that the Hawaiian people live by. And I would like to add that it didn't always necessarily, not every ahupua'a was necessarily from or ran from the land all the way down to the sea, but I guess just that concept that they were all connected in terms from the ecological perspective from the ecological perspective to us as people, and it wasn't viewed as a separate thing. People and place were one. So yeah, it's definitely a system to look up to nowadays, and as we learn more about the changes in our world and things happening, I think it's something that we hope to strive for nowadays in Hawaii, and to look back to the past to guide us into the future. And yeah, that's kind of, I guess.
Yeah, well,
what
it was just unique, but it makes so much sense. You
yeah,
know, a lot of the water is coming from the mountains and working down through the land, and it's the source of them being able to grow fruit and nourish all the vegetation as it makes its way to the sea.
exactly.
And it's
Yeah, and that's another good point to make, is that the source of water, how every every living thing relies on, you know, our water systems to give it life. And yeah, like you said, that was important from our uplands all the way down to the ocean. And so everything that happens above, like I said, in the uplands would affect what was below us. And
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
yeah, that was the
Yeah.
main concept, I guess, of the Ahupua'a system.
A hupua system.
Yeah.
And
It
yeah,
is very
thank you for explaining that. And
yeah.
yeah, I think every time I engage in a conversation that involves the connectedness to the environment, it's becoming more ingrained in me, and that is very important as an educator, because I need to transmit that message as well. But yeah, it's just amazing how we have mountains on land, mountains under the sea. We
Yeah.
have photosynthesis happening on land, photosynthesis in the sea, and chemosynthesis at the bottom of the sea. We have winds affecting our mountains. We have water currents affecting the biological communities as well.
Yeah.
And we have all the biotic factors, oxygen, more oxygen on land, a little, some oxygen in the waters, less oxygen deeper in the waters.
And
So
I think that's really awesome about these expeditions. It's like we're exploring places that we never had access to back then, and using technology and developing knowledge nowadays to have access and really look to the stories of the past to make sense of what we're seeing today, but from different perspectives. So that's really cool about, I think, yeah, these types of expeditions.
Yeah, and I don't know how many people out there, given that we have a worldwide audience here, are aware of the Hawaiian fish ponds and how they design these incredible structures that are still present today, and some of them are still active today, and how clever they made these ponds to actually maintain stocks of fish and other things for feeding their populations.
Yeah, yeah, the fish ponds are really yeah, smart systems, I guess, that they pretty much use their landscape to raise fish, and they understood that that there would be a lot of or within, they would use the fresh water from the springs from underground or the streams from nearby and the coastal ecosystems, and they understood that it would mix with the brackish water and make this really rich sort of primary production dense area, and really be able to just kind of attract the fish to them, and then, like you said, raise and farm these dozen, or yeah, just a lot of
Yeah, the ava, the mullet, the
yeah,
moi, all of these very important
all types of
fish,
fish.
all types of fish. And the
So
seaweeds too.
yeah, we can't forget the limu, the
yeah, the
seaweed.
limu.
So
But they're just, how much work was involved in creating some of these ponds. I'm most familiar with the one off of Kaneohe Bay. I knew the guy who was actually operating that for a number of years. Went out
yeah,
to visit him, and how much work it took to place all of these rocks to create this enclosure, this huge enclosure, and then the really cool fencing and netting system by which they would capture the fish.
yeah, yeah. Like you said, it took many hands and community really to make these fish ponds operate. And one saying that I would hear from a lot of fish pond practitioners is, a healthy fish pond is a reflection of a healthy community. And I think that just kind of says a lot of how much hands it takes to, yeah, to put these together. So yeah, really incredible. I'm always inspired and just in awe the more I learn about our culture.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
also it's my understanding a lot of these are used as sort of a reserve by the chiefs back then, looking out for their people. So if they're coming into some hard times for food, these fish ponds, you know, they just didn't allow uncontrolled fishing in these fish ponds at all. They were essentially a reservoir of fish.
yeah,
And then if some hard times came up, then they would go and they could tap these resources as well to feed the population and keep them going.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. It acted as a sort of nursery for these types of fish, and yeah, like you said, a place for them to allow them to get bigger or grow before being harvested. So
yeah.
yeah, really awesome.
It really is. It's really awesome. And you can see these from some of the satellite altimetry and from aerial photographs. You can actually see these ponds. They still exist.
Mm-hmm.
They were structurally so sound out there that they're just, it's just amazing. And they figured all this out, you know, centuries ago. They figured out how to do these things. And
Yeah, I think Hawaii is really unique in that way too. That it just so like ecological makeup and how much fresh water existed in Hawaii, and they're able to, yeah, it's a lot different than some other islands, I guess, around the world. So very, yeah, very
I guess
rich place.
I guess necessity is the mother of invention, as they say. You know, the original Polynesian voyagers that coming to the islands, they had to figure it out pretty quickly, how to live and how to prosper
Yeah.
in an island that's quite different than it is now. You know, because there was there was a lot more restricted vegetation and animal life back then.
Right.
You know, of course, the sea provided an enormous bounty for them at that time.
Right.
But still, and they figured it out. They came up with some really unique ideas to sustain and grow their populations and their culture.
Mm.
It was cool, a very cool place to live for 41 years for my wife and I. We really enjoyed it.
Awesome.
But now this resurgence in interest in Hawaiian culture and everything else, that means it's not going to be lost. I think, you know, that it's going to be retained, which is so important.
Yeah, it's really a great time to be Hawaiian.
Well, you know, also what Nainoa Thompson did with the Polynesian voyaging, too, was just extraordinary. That knowledge was just so unique. And the fact that he was able to revive that,
Yeah.
you know, he and others, of course, it was just completely him.
Mm.
But the skills to be able to read the water and be able to navigate without compasses and now GPS and all these other tools we have today.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is amazing.
Yeah. Well, there's still not a whole lot in our water column, is there?
It's been pretty bleak.
It's been pretty bleak.
I will say that the water around here has been very clear. Very, like, not much, what do you call it, productivity?
Yeah.
Sediment, anyway. Like, seeing the view of Herc from Argus is some of the best. It's amazing.
They have a term for that. Oligotrophic, I think, is the term that they use to describe these sort of nutrient-poor waters, which make them quite clear because there's not a whole lot of organic material in them that you'd find in more northern latitudes and over toward the continent.
Can you say that word again?
Oligotrophic.
Oligotrophic. So this water is not oligotrophic?
It is oligotrophic.
It is oligotrophic.
Yes.
That means lack of stuff in it.
I believe so. But
Oligo is lack of?
I think so. I better double check that because this is not my area. I'm pretty sure that's the term to describe.
Chris said oligotrophic. Cool.
So we've got 1,000 meters to go.
Another hour?
70 minutes.
Yeah.
So we'll be up around 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
Hopefully do a deck winch handoff at around 7:45. We'll see. Maybe just after.
By the way, I forgot to mention something earlier as well. And one of the really cool things I noticed about the Nautilus program back in 2018 is that many of you are trained to do different functions, and you're constantly doing this. And I saw Erin over there on the crane this morning. I saw her get up there and strap in. I assume she's the one who deployed the ROV, and she's the mapping specialist on the ship. But she, in addition to that, she can lift this whole ROV and get it off of the ship.
Well, her job is to know where the ROV is supposed to go, and in that case, it was supposed to go in the water.
That was my first Herc deployment. That was
Oh.
Was that really your first?
Yeah, I did a few deployments for the HUI vehicles on the tech demo a few expeditions ago. So it wasn't my first vehicle lift, but it was the first Herc. So I was a little nervous, but it went okay.
You did great.
Thank you.
Wow, that was very cool to see you up there.
I saw Allison do it quite a bit back in 2018, and then I was just talking to Nicole also about the whole process, and I just think that's wonderful. It's a small organization, so everybody can do a lot of different roles there.
Yeah, it's cool when you see the COO of an organization running the crane.
Yes.
I agree. I think that's what makes the ship special. I never had no training in navigation or anything like that, so that happened on board. I came on specifically for mapping. And
Wow.
then they cross-train wherever you can fit, and I really like navigation role now too, so it's quite fun.
Yeah. So what were you trained in originally?
I'm a mapper. I'm a CCOM graduate, well, soon-to-be graduate. Worked at QPS for 10 years doing seafloor mapping software, and then did my master's, almost finished, in ocean mapping.
Excellent.
So speaking of mapping, if I could ask you 2 questions, Chris.
Okay, I'll do my best. And I'll make it up if I don't know the answer.
No, they're just like operations questions. I think we can easily, on the way up to the next dive, hit that gap in the Okeanos data. If you're looking at HIPAC at all, there's just a kind of a missing chunk there that we could easily hit without extending our transit at all very much. Just wondering if you're cool with that.
I am absolutely cool with that.
And then the other question is, I remember Steve, more in carbonates though, saying that like 30 to 60 degree slopes were really good for bio. Do you have a similar kind of situation here, or is it kind of all over the place as far as the best level of slope for finding biology?
As I mentioned before, I think at least once, I consider myself a ridgeite, which basically, because I view of all the topography we could dive on, that provides the best opportunity for a multi-objective sort of cruise, which is what we're on for both geology and biology. A lot of biologists, they like the really steep walls, you know, because you tend to have upwelling and current flow along these steep walls. That's fine, except I also view that as potentially dangerous for cabled vehicles as well, because you sometimes...
Trevor loves that.
I'm right into that. That is my pick if I were to pick a dive site. It's right on the cliff.
Yeah, well, the ridge itself provides opportunities to do all of that, if you ask me. If you want to stay completely safe, you can be right on the crest, and you can get quite high current flow coming over these ridges, depending on how they're oriented to the prevailing bottom currents down there. So that's one of the things. And so you tend to get a lot of biology. The crest is a fairly gentle slope if you follow the crest up, whereas its sides are extremely steep. So if you're not seeing much on the crest, you can sort of dip down below onto one of these walls and kind of run alongside. If like Trevor, the pilots view that as safe, and you might find more stuff there. But often we find a lot of stuff right on the crest. Plus,
sounds great.
Those ridges are there for a reason, and part of the reason is a lot of the slope has eroded away over time. That's one of the reasons why you get these ridges, in addition to the fact that the way the magma actually erupts in linear fashion sometimes. But you can often find really good rocks on these ridges, and I think we've been finding them already, these beautiful pillow formations. And so you can get really good rocks, you can get really good geology. You're in a very safe environment if you're in a high current environment, because there's only one direction that'll blow the ROV into the substrate, and that's straight up slope, which is not that steep on the crest. So it's less of a concern. And so that's what I kind of like. I mean, I realize some people will go, well, you know, we need to know what the animals are down in the sediment. We need to know on the escarpment faces what those are too, because there's going to be different animals. But, you know, sometimes we have one shot at these seamounts and we've got a lot of things we got to do. I always sort of gravitate to those and think we have the best shot. I've been on these landscape escarpments before, and they tend to be pretty barren. Now, what we're seeing the last couple dives, you know, we haven't seen a lot of biology, and there's a number of reasons for that. We're starting these dives deeper on purpose. Okay, we want to make sure that we're below that carbonate cap on these guyots, because those rocks are not useful for dating as well, and they're not going to be great for, well, they could be okay for Beth, because you can get manganese crusts on these carbonate caps as well. But we're trying to stay below that. So that's one of the things, but you know, I lost my thought there. But anyway, I think that's sort of why I try to pick these sites, because I think they can offer everything we need to have a successful mission.
Perfect.
Great. Well, we're up here eyeballing the next ridge, and we're getting excited. Looks pretty cool.
I know that. This is kind of my favorite of the cruise here, because it's so long and so sharp.
Yeah.
Along here. The issue, of course, is this ridge in a good orientation to cause this high current flow over the crest? And we really won't know until we get down there.
I'm thinking that it is, based on the way the current was pushing the vehicle at the south end of this seamount. It's not, I don't think it's completely cross current, but I think there will be some funneling. Can you see my hand? Are you able to see my hand here?
Yeah.
I'm thinking the current's going to go kind of like this way. So it's not going to go straight up the wall. It's not going to get parallel to the wall. It's going to be kind of 45. Just a guess, just totally based on not much data.
No,
and we'll see.
It's a good guess, and we'll see.
That'll be nice.
Yeah, so I'm pretty excited about this dive.
Yeah.
That's why I thought that if we're going to do a really long one, this would be the first one. That makes a lot of sense. And those sides are so steep.
Yeah.
Remember, these things offer just a block, a barrier from water flow, and the water's got to figure out how to get around this ridge. In some cases, if you just have like a pinnacle somewhere, oftentimes the water will scoot around the sides of the pinnacle, not necessarily over the top, because the easier route is to go around the sides. But in a ridge, you don't have that. It can't really get around the sides. It's got to kind of go over the top if it's oriented right. And that means it's going to get accelerated when it goes, and corals and sponges love that accelerated water. So
cool.
Yep.
It's going to be a fun dive.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I've looked forward to every dive.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And even these more barren ones, I know they may not be quite as interesting to the armchair biologists out there, but at the same time, they're very important to do, because they're giving us more information. You know, basically a negative data point is still a very, very valuable data point.
Oh, and I mean, I think all these dives are beautiful. We've done mud slugs, and like anytime I'm seeing basalt pinnacles and you know, nodules and stuff, I just think it's the coolest. So
yeah,
none of these dives are boring.
No,
yeah, the
totally.
pillow lavas, I view them as just an event that took place millions of years ago that's frozen in time. We're actually seeing what the seafloor looked like when it was being created. If these pillows are intact, you know, and not too broken up, it's just, you know, I always like to visualize, you know, when it was actually erupting and when these pillows were being formed and all this lava was oozing out like toothpaste. It just had to be an amazing sight.
For sure.
And so they form that way, those pillow lavas, because of the rapid cooling of the lava coming out under the ocean, the pressure and the cooling of water, and cools in those spherical formations because of that.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever saw that rather unique video that Richard Pyle did, who's with the Bishop Museum. I mean, that's mesmerizing. It's old VHS, unfortunately, and of course everybody's graduated to 4K. It would have been fantastic if you had 4K video. But that crazy son of a gun, he went down with somebody I worked with for years, Jane Culp at the Y Undersea Research Laboratory, and the two of them went down and dove right there while the pillows were being formed underwater, and there was glass in the water and all types of material and precipitate and everything else, and he's filming these pillows being formed off of the Big Island. And you're just looking at this, just mesmerizing.
And they're rolling downhill and solidifying different currents.
Yeah.
Making those credible noises, those really loud crackling noises.
Yeah. Janie, of course, I worked with her very closely for quite a few years. I think she was kind of scared, but she hung in there like a trooper. And of course, Rich. I don't
Rich
think
will do anything.
He'll do anything. He doesn't have a scared bone in his body.
That guy's amazing.
I'm sorry, I missed the names. Did you say Jane Denny?
Jane Culp.
Jane Culp, okay.
She's still here in Hawaii. She's retired. She was one of our video annotators at Hurl, and also she dove with me a lot because she knew a lot of the animals, and we did these visual surveys from the sub. And then Richard Pyle is just a premier mesophotic technical diver here, very, very well known in Hawaii. He's working with the Bishop Museum right now in the ichthyology collection. He's a fish guy. And
yeah, he took over the collection there from one of the preeminent fish biologists, Jack Randall, after he passed away a couple of years ago. And Richard manages Rich manages the ichthyology collection over there now at the Bishop Museum. It's probably one of the largest collections of fish samples anywhere, and certainly anywhere in the Pacific. It's the preeminent location for that in the Pacific, but maybe one of the largest collections anywhere.
Yeah, and there's a big, huge box in that collection, and I was treated to them opening that box for me one day, and inside of it as the famous megamouth shark.
Oh, wow.
It is a totally unique deep water pelagic shark that somehow got hooked. It's a plankton filter, but it's one of the most bizarre sharks you've ever seen in your life. And they brought that up, and I'm trying to remember who described it. I mean, I don't think it was Jack. I think it was who was at the Waikiki Aquarium. It wasn't Bruce Carlson. It was the predecessor, I think, there. But anyway, it was so cool to hear I've heard so many stories about megamouth, and then I happened to be down there in the collection, and they opened the box up so I could see this very, very famous shark down there.
It's neat. Yeah, down in that collection, I mean, it's amazing to wander through the aisles, just hundreds of shelves of preserved specimens of fish in these jars. There was a really good article in Hana Ho, which is a magazine in Hawaii, about that whole collection. Has some beautiful images of it, and I think it's online if you want to check it out. But it's some of these deep sea fish are just amazing that they have preserved in there. The ones with the clear heads, where the eyes they can pivot and look different directions. Just amazing adaptations. Some of these organisms.
Yeah, you know, if you're a visitor to Hawaii, the Bishop Museum definitely ought to be a stop. And it's not just for weird fish. The Bishop Museum is a wonderful museum that highlights Hawaiian culture and some of the artifacts that have been retained and preserved from, hundreds of years ago. It's quite a really wonderful exhibit, and they not only do biology, but they have a huge number of buildings that are not a huge number, but I mean, they have a number of buildings that have got all of these wonderful artifacts and stories about the Hawaiian culture and the Hawaiian people in there. So I will plug for them. It's a fantastic museum, and hopefully there's some people out there that are hearing this and they put it on their to-do list if they're planning on going to Hawaii and visiting.
It's a must-see for sure.
Can I ask one more pushy next dive question?
Yes.
Do we have a start point?
For today's dive?
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, yes, the dive plan, I haven't put it out yet, but it's in the dive. I
Okay.
can get that to you as soon as you want.
Yeah, whenever I can get it in, and then we'll know where we need to go. But I'm just being pushy now. You have time.
Well, I can take a break and send you a draft. I usually send the dive plan to Emil, and he looks them over and makes sure I didn't screw something up
For sure.
before he distributes them. But
at your convenience, sir.
Sure. Yeah, I could get up and walk for a moment.
Okay, if you want.
What are you getting tired of this blue?
Which I think is teal, maybe.
Teal.
Teal?
Maybe? Maybe no, a little too blue, blue-green.
Have you been decorating your home recently?
I think about colors of blue a lot. Though we did have one blue water watch where we were going through favorite colors, and every single person in the control van except for me said some shade of blue-green. It was just like, it was kind of...
What's your favorite color?
Orange.
Okay.
Orange.
Cool.
It's like all these people and they're blue. I like blue a lot, but not my favorite.
That's because you're a mapper and oranges kind of show up really nicely against the...
Shows up really nicely against blue.
Right. I will be back in a second. I'm going to go get you some numbers.
Okay, thanks.
Numbers.
And Aaron and video, how are you feeling about our next dive?
I'm feeling good. I'm always feeling good. And we're not going to be on the blue water going down, so
Yeah.
I'm feeling even better.
Just get to show up, rock star in, and just fly around a bit.
Yeah, no, they get to do the
Do some science.
hard part.
Can't wait for science.
Hey.
So
when we get to the top and I come back into bypass, can you watch my voltages, please, on all three phases? I just want to see how high they get when I'm in low pressure. That'll be right before we kill high voltage. Thanks. "43 minutes, 42 minutes to service. Right on schedule. Yeah. I bet the other watch could even
very
eat ahead
well.
of time.
How's it going back there? Are you getting lots of comments from people?
Some.
Oh, yeah, we have a viewer here, Jason. He keeps commenting about the corals and the sponges.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, he has been following the dive since 2015, starting with Okeanos. And he follows Chris very closely.
That's
Thinks
really
he's
cool.
a genius.
That's really
he's
cool.
He's a pretty well-rounded viewer. I wonder where he's watching from and what his specialty is. I wonder how old he is. But lots and lots of comments from him, questions too. Yeah.
I remember hearing there was one group that was like a knitting group, and they really loved to knit and watch the Nautilus. Do you remember that?
Oh, wow.
That's a good way to pass the knitting time.
That's beautiful. There is a knitting project on our website, even Aladdin's website.
Really?
Yeah, and that somebody knitted or crochet a piece that looks like the ocean.
I think the challenge should be to the knitting group to knit or to crochet a little Hercules.
That would be cool.
I have a crochet to Hercules.
I think a knit like blanket or something in the color pattern of a map, like a multi-beam image.
Oh, that would be so
rainbow.
cool.
Oh, Trevor. Now you're talking.
Trevor, wow.
Wow.
That's pretty great.
I was just bringing in little stuff, and Trevor just nailed the home run.
I don't know how hard things are, so like that might be really difficult, and I have no idea.
Oh, probably not though. I mean, it would be impossible for me, but I think somebody else.
I feel like if someone was really good, they could, yeah, find all the different colors and make it really cool. So that's our knitting challenge today, folks.
The knitting challenge. Knit a multi-beam map.
And another fact is like maps don't have to be rainbow. I don't know, like everyone's used to seeing them rainbow on here, but that's
Maybe whatever you'd like.
It's a default that's just been now ingrained in like the ocean mapping world, but it's actually a terrible default for like so many reasons.
Tell us how you really feel.
No, it really, like rainbows are just like you have there's no conceptual understanding of like what that means. Like that red is shallow and purple is deep.
Okay.
That makes no sense to your brain immediately until you know it.
Until you learn it.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
So there's a lot of people who think about color maps a lot and like what makes more sense intuitively. Plus, for colorblind people, that's a terrible color map.
Doesn't work at all. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so-
I was going to say
what
they
do you think's
wouldn't.
better?
I like ones that are like one kind of color ramp that's continuous of one shade changing.
Ooh, that would be a much
Like
prettier blanket
White to
as
black
well.
kind of thing?
Yeah.
Or?
like a white to blue or white to, something that's just
Okay.
a
Just a
gentle
gradient.
gradient transition,
Yeah.
but it's not as easy to see sharp. Like if you're trying to pull out sharp transitions, that's more subtle.
Okay.
I also really like the default one in MATLAB now. I think it's Perula. It's like an orange
Okay.
to blue.
Ooh,
Orange to blue.
I see why you like that one.
Adam Sewell actually thinks a lot about color maps. We've had some conversations, and he sent me some good color maps.
He's out on the next cruise, isn't he?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
great. I haven't seen him for a couple of years.
yeah.
Wasn't the last time he was on, was the last time we were here? Or has he been on recently, more recent?
I don't know. I think it's been a couple of years, but yeah, I'm looking forward to sailing with him. I've known him for a long time. He was like Adam Sewell and Katie Croft were the two clients I went to see first when I started working for Flatermouse, and it's just
cool.
amazing like how life has transitioned. And
That's
they were
cool,
they were
yeah.
both still kind to me. Katie was still a grad student with oh my gosh, who runs Ocean Networks Canada now? Or at University of Victoria.
Runs it?
Well, who's big boss? Maybe not runs it, but she's. Oh my gosh, I can't think. She's very important. Anyway, Katie was her student, and I went to see her and Katie, and then went to Woods Hole to see Adam. And they were very patient with me.
So we have 45 more minutes to come up to the surface.
There we go.
Will the shade of blue change or stay the same?
We'll get more light, maybe. Is the sun up yet?
Lighter with more. And would we see any fish?
We never
Any
know.
other organisms?
It's always a mystery, a surprise.
The mystery of the deep sea.
I mean, I think there's a shark yesterday at the surface on retrieval. The ROV. Oceanic white tip is my guess. Yeah, I'm surprised we haven't been seeing more critters on the ascent. Usually you see shrimp or squid or other things.
Yeah.
Look at this mess. What a
Do
mess.
you want me to clear it?
No, it
You like
doesn't affect
you
me.
like,
It's just like,
you like drawing arcs?
yeah. A lot easier when it's deep.
Why is it easier?
Cable dynamics? I don't know.
Yeah.
Science. Physics.
Physics, definitely physics.
Where do I see the
Kate
current-
Moran, that's who I'm trying to think of.
Okay,
Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah. Where do I find the current value here? current
The
value.
supposed current value is
0.6, thank you.
Yep. And that's, the vector is this one.
Yeah, Raj. And wind is the 10.2?
Yeah, and that's, we're going into the wind right now, so they made that choice.
Cool.
So Kanalu, this is your first deep sea cruise. Yeah.
Yeah, first time.
What do you think so far?
It's awesome. Yeah, it's really cool. It's like kind of an adrenaline rush, I think, every time the ROV is down. And just, I learned so much, especially from you and Chris and your guys' conversations, and yeah, it's really awesome.
Yeah, it's a very different experience than one of the more shallow water expeditions. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
What was your, what did you study, or what are you studying again?
Right now I'm looking at like coastal erosion or sea level rise impacts on this one atoll island called Lalo. It's actually also within the monument. Yeah, so most of my stuff is actually, usually I use satellite imagery and UAV or drone imagery to map these changes over time.
So are you going out and doing that process? Are you doing the drone work and stuff?
So actually we just went up this past summer, and yeah, we collected more GPS surveys, and unfortunately we weren't able to fly the drone. But other than that, most of my stuff has been just using, yeah, satellite imagery to map.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
And atoll, the French frigate shoals, or Lalo atoll, is one of the more important locations for monk seals, because a lot of the shallow water islets in that atoll provide habitat for them to have their pups, and also for green sea turtles. It's the island, one of the islands that you were studying, the East Island, was the most important green sea turtle nesting site in the entire archipelago, with upward of 600 plus nests on that tiny little island, in a high season for the nesting. And now that's part of what you're studying, right? Because it got mostly wiped out by a kind of a irregular hurricane that came through as a Category 3 storm right over the top of the island, and pretty much eliminated this island that had been there for 1,000, what did they say, about 1,000 years? Is from the sediment samples, it had been stable for that long. Is that right?
Yeah, it's been around for a while. I'm not exactly sure in date wise, but yeah, it's been around for a while. And yeah, like you said, our main goal is looking at that recovery, especially from that Hurricane Walaka that came through. And yeah, trying to see what parts of the island are more stable or more vulnerable, especially with a lot of sea turtles that rely on this place for nesting, and monk seals for refuge and basking and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, it's not a lot of land up there, as we were saying the other day. We protect, the monument has 580,000 square miles of protected area, and only 6 square miles of that is land. These tiny little islands, and that's why they're just covered in 14 million seabirds use these islands for nesting and breeding, and you walk on these islands and you're just surrounded. You're literally in a seabird colony with seabirds burrowing into the sand underneath you, and seabirds on the ground, such as the city terns, the red-tailed tropic birds, and other birds using the shrubs as nesting grounds. So they use the entire habitat. It's really incredible, huh?
Yeah.
Morning.